The silence here carries weight, as if every speck of dust holds the memory of the world we left behind. The earth, once alive beneath my feet, now creaks dry and rough like old paper. I write these words not out of hope, but out of habit, like someone planting a seed already knowing the soil won't respond. Perhaps the wind will read it. Perhaps time will swallow everything. It doesn't matter. This letter is my final conversation with the world, or with someone who may never exist. A confession to the dust, a memory cast into the void, as if the earth itself had the right to know what we did to it. My name is Richard Taylor, a farmer, son of farmers, husband to a woman with strong hands and a calm smile, father to 2 boys who now exist only in memory. Life was simple, but full. Rising with the rooster, the smell of fresh coffee spilling into the kitchen, heading out to the fields with knees still cold from the morning. It wasn't much, but it was everything. The sound of the AM radio playing old songs while I cleaned the planter, my wife sewing by the window, the boys throwing stones into the lake. That's how we measured happiness. In the quiet between the days, in abundance without excess. I loved the soil like one loves a brother. I knew its moods, its silences, its secrets. Every harvest was a conversation, every crop a promise fulfilled. I grew corn, beans, sometimes a little wheat. The scent of damp earth after the rain was like the perfume of home. In summer, we had Sunday barbecues. In winter, thick soups and repeated stories by the stove. My dreams were never made of concrete or glass. I dreamed of a porch filled with laughter, grandchildren running between the corn stalks, my wife calling me inside when the sky began to turn gold. But even the firmest dreams rot when time decides to change. And now, writing with dirty fingers and memory slipping through like sand, I realize how deeply the roots that held me all my life are also what hurts the most to remember, because they were torn from me one by one, not by force, but by forgetting, by a hurry that was never mine. It started almost imperceptibly, like a silent plague that spreads within before it shows on the surface. First came the seeds, the ones that had always germinated with almost magical precision. They began to fail. 1 in 10, then 1 in 3, then none. I thought it was the weather, a bad season, something temporary. But soon I realized it wasn't just here. At the markets, produce started to vanish. The scent of fresh fruit faded from the stalls. Bread, once a constant presence, became smaller, more expensive, then disappeared. In the city, I saw people fighting over bags of flour. I saw desperate eyes staring at empty shelves like someone looking into an abyss. The television still tried to keep people calm. They talked about logistical challenges, about climate adaptation, but the truth was no one knew how to stop what was coming. What they later called the global food collapse began with a string of events that seemed unrelated. A new hybrid plague resistant to all pesticides, storms that wiped out entire crops in minutes, glaciers melting and altering rainfall cycles. Nature started speaking loudly, and no one wanted to listen. The earth stopped obeying. Supermarkets became battlefields. I saw with my own eyes a mother being beaten over a can of corn, and I don't blame her. I would have fought too. On my farm, the signs were clear and cruel. The cows grew thin. The corn dried out before it could flower. The wells began to drop. I shouted to the sky, begged for answers, but only silence came back. Orders for fertilizer and feed stopped arriving. Then the internet went down. Then the power. The modern world, so dependent on everything and so proud of its efficiency, revealed its fragility like a pane of glass in a hailstorm. There was no way to plant, no way to harvest, no way to hope someone would come and fix things. The cities were the first to fall. When the food ran out, so did the laws, the restraints, the civilization. Refugees started walking along the roads, trying to trade anything for food, watches, jewelry, memories. Some made it out here. I gave what I could, then I had to close the gate. That was one of the hardest things I've ever done, to deny bread to a hungry man. But I had to survive too. Slowly, the noise of the world faded. First the engines, then the voices, then the birds, and then only the wind remained. And me. The barren land around the house became my only horizon. I was alone, but I wasn't the only one to blame. We all laid the bricks of this ruin, with our haste, our greed, our blind faith in progress. The kind that promises everything and demands nothing in return. The collapse didn't fall from the sky. It sprouted from our own seed. And now, all that's left is the harvest. Today, the farm feels more like a monument to what we were than a home. I walk through the dry furrows of the land as if visiting graves. Each planting row now a memory that no longer sprouts. The house still stands, but it has aged with me. Creaking floors, dusty windows, silences that scream at night. I wake to the sound of my own heartbeat, sometimes frightened, sometimes hopeful that some human voice will respond. But there is no one. Only the rustling of the wind in the dead leaves and the snap of the traps I set, hoping to catch some rabbit forgotten by the apocalypse. I've learned to ration everything, the rainwater I collect in buckets, the last handfuls of beans I planted when there was still some life in the soil, the fire I must conserve to avoid being lost in the cold. The birds are gone. No song, no nest, no flutter of wings. Even the insects, once bothersome and omnipresent, seem to have given up on this exhausted earth. Sometimes, I think the whole world held its breath and never let it go. Loneliness weighs more than hunger. I live like a remnant, not a man, but the echo of a man. I spend the days watching the sky, reading old notebooks, writing words that perhaps no one will ever read. I talk to myself with the walls, with the dry trees, with a photograph of my wife that I keep by my bed. I've thought of leaving too, of ceasing to resist. But then I hear something, not a sound, but a memory. The laughter of my children running across the field, the smell of fresh bread in the late afternoon. And that forces me to go on. The worst isn't death, it's doubt. The question that haunts me every morning, am I the last one? Is there, somewhere, another heart beating, another soul waiting for an answer? Sometimes I write letters like this and place them in bottles, bury them, leave them on branches, like offerings to chance. Not out of hope, but out of instinct. Because even when everything seems dead, there's still something inside us that insists on planting. And maybe, just maybe, some seed of it will still find soil. Now that everything has fallen silent, I hear what the noise of the world once muffled. And what I hear is guilt. Not just mine, all of ours. We planted progress as if it were eternal, cultivated haste as if time were our servant, and took from the earth more than it could give, as if it were not alive, as if it didn't suffer. We called it advancement, but it was just greed with another name. We ignored the signs, mocked the warnings, laughed at the predictions. And now, here, alone, I understand that it wasn't the world that needed us. It was the other way around. The strongest longing is not for my children, not for my wife, not for the quiet afternoons on the porch. It's for the idea that there was a future, that even with mistakes there would always be another season. We lived as if everything were guaranteed, and now, surrounded by nothing, I realize the earth would forgive us if only we had learned to listen. If anyone finds these words, even if it's 100 years from now or in another world where the earth begins to bloom again, may they read them with an open heart. I did not write to be remembered, but so that the mistake may not be repeated. Life, like the soil, requires daily care, not just to bear fruit, but to continue existing. May you learn to listen to the wind, respect the pause, honor the cycle. Because we do not just cultivate the soil, we also cultivate care. And without it, even time grows tired of waiting. Subscribe to the channel to experience the upcoming videos.